Subject Linguistics, course title Pragmatics and Discourse Analysis, Module 24, the Birmingham Model of Discourse Analysis. Writer and presenter Rajneesh Arora. In this module, I will discuss Sinclair and Coulthard's approach to discourse analysis, popularly known as the Birmingham model. As there had been no attempt before towards a general descriptive framework for analysis of spoken discourse, the model is considered pioneering. The study was conducted in the University of Birmingham by John Sinclair and his colleagues. Therefore, it is also called the Birmingham model. Sinclair and Coulthard attempt to analyze the language used by teacher and pupils in the classroom. They attempt to study the way in which units above the rank of clause are related and patterned, and the way in which such language functions as statement, question, and command are realized through grammatical structure and position in the discourse. The model is based on the principles outlined for rank scale grammatical models by Halliday. In the grammatical model, for example, word is made up of one or more morphemes and combines with other words to make a group. In the discourse model of classroom interaction, exchanges consists of moves. Moves consist of smaller discrete units called acts. Exchanges combine to form transactions. In a lesson, there can be one or more transactions. Let's discuss the concept of exchange, move, and act in detail. Sinclair and Coulthard initially considered only two units, utterance and exchange, but soon they realized they could not go far. Let's look at the following example given by Sinclair and Coulthard. Teacher, can you tell me why do you eat all that food? Yes. Pupil, to keep you strong. Teacher, to keep you strong. Yes. To keep you strong. Why do you want to be strong? Sinclair and Coulthard noticed that there is a boundary in the middle of teacher's second utterance. They then decided to consider a unit smaller than the utterance, which they called move. A typical classroom exchange, they noticed, is made up of three parts: initiation by the teacher, response by the pupil, and feedback again by the teacher. They then observed words like now, well, right, okay, etc., forming the boundaries of discourse. They labeled these words frames. Frames were usually followed by statements about discourse, which they labeled focus. In their framework, frame and focus are moves which combine to form boundary exchanges. Opening, answering, and follow-up moves under initiation, response, and feedback respectively combine to form teaching exchanges. Boundary exchanges mark the boundary of transactions. They then noticed that moves were made up of smaller units called acts. Acts are defined by their functions in the discourse. Elicitation, for instance, has its function to request a linguistic response. The function of directive, for instance, is to request a non-linguistic response. The system suggests 22 acts. They are marker, starter, elicitation, check, directive, informative, prompt, clue, cue, bid, nomination, acknowledge, reply, react, comment, accept, evaluate, silent stress, meta statement, conclusion, loop, and aside. Let's look at now the concept of speech act and discourse act and how they are related. Sinclair and Coulthard suggest a lack of fit between grammar and discourse, which of course is well known in speech act theory. An interrogative sentence, for example, can be an elicitation or a directive or both at the same time. Assigning an appropriate function to a sentence in the discourse relates to what they call situation and tactics. Situation refers to the situational factors which are relevant to interpretation. For example, Sinclair and Coulthard suggest that what are you laughing at can be either a question or a command to stop laughing, but in the classroom it is more likely to be the latter. Sinclair and Coulthard provide the context of this utterance and see this as a misinterpretation on the part of student as a command to stop laughing, which was not the teacher's intention. Tactics deals with assigning a discourse value to an item in terms of what linguistic items have preceded it and what are expected to follow and what do follow. This suggests that notion of act is different from speech act. Many researchers in their discussion of Sinclair and Coulthard model, however, have referred to the same as speech act, and perhaps rightly so, because the function of a sentence cannot always be determined in terms of its position in the discourse. We can argue that, notwithstanding the fact that Sinclair and Coulthard do not attempt a speech act analysis, the discourse act assigned to most utterances in their description is in terms of the criteria for speech act analysis. There are of course a few exceptions. For instance, the elicitations in Sinclair and Coulthard are not questions because one of the felicity conditions that the speaker does not know the answer is not fulfilled. Towards the end of their analysis of teacher-pupil interaction, Sinclair and Coulthard attempt to formulate a model of discourse. According to them, there are 5 categories that are crucial to the analysis of discourse. They are A. Orientation, B. Organization, C. Fit, D. Play, and E. Assembly. Each category corresponds to some rank scale of units and is signaled through a system of choice. Let's talk about the category of orientation. Sinclair and Coulthard observe a problem which has always been with linguistics is the relation between subjective and objective ways of understanding the nature of language through the concept of orientation. We are able to build both subjective and objective aspects into a coherent model of verbal interaction. Sinclair and Coulthard discuss different possibilities. There is a possibility that throughout the interaction, the discourse participants maintain a consistent orientation towards each other. Another possibility is that their orientations may converge or diverge from each other. There may be other possibilities as well because orientation is signaled through a complex network of choices. Sinclair and Coulthard point out that in the classroom discourse, the teacher and the pupils maintain a consistent orientation towards each other. The teacher's orientation is rarely challenged. The initiation response feedback structure allows the teacher to be dominating. By giving elliptical responses and avoiding initiation, pupils acknowledge the domination of the teacher. But the nature of interaction may be very different in case of committee language. There may be struggle for domination which may be clearly reflected in the patterns of orientation in the use of a distinctive phraseology. Sinclair and Coulthard assert that the system that carries orientation are primarily lexico-referential. For example, the selection of actual words, particularly at the beginning of an utterance. A lot of echoing is a sign of convergence. The use of synonym signals local divergence, and a lack of overlay in vocabulary indicates a general inability or refusal to enter a common universe of discourse. Then the use of substitution words referring back to the previous speaker's actual words. These signal an overlapping of orientations, but the speaker retains independence. Then the choice of elliptical structures, one word answers and the like, where the syntax of an utterance depends on that of the previous speaker. Acceptance of the domination of another is the meaning that emerges from this choice. This has implications for the analysis of any text that contains the use of dialogue or is a piece of natural conversation. The analysis of orientation can be attempted through the analysis of cohesive devices like referring expressions, substitutions, repetitions, and ellipsis. Next is organization. The next lower category than orientation is organization. Organization is concerned with the network of choices through which participants signal their strategies for the conduct of discourse. It relates to the placing of boundaries and the alignment of discourse participants within them. In Sinclair and Coulthard, the analysis of classroom talk shows the signaling of boundaries by frame and focus. Other discourse types will have less clear boundaries like I am starting off or I am finishing off. Sinclair and Coulthard point out that study of minor boundaries requires a study of the organization of turn-taking, which would include predictable interruptions. The description of minor boundaries is not important for classroom exchanges, but may be important for the analysis of interviews, telephone conversation, etc. In the analysis of drama, the description of minor boundaries can be attempted using the turn-taking system. But we can argue that the frame and focus or the framing and focusing moves, which are so important in the study of classroom discourse, are not significant in the analysis of drama. In classroom discourse, they do not belong to the main discourse, that is, teaching exchanges. In drama, if there is any instance of frame and focus which may point to the succeeding discourse activity, will be part of initiating move only. The way in which participants extend, contract, and vary the progress of a unit in discourse will tell us about the alignment of participants. Sinclair and Coulthard point out that Brazil's work on intonation provides interesting possibilities of a system of key choice in the final tone group of an utterance. A high key choice, for example, will engage the other participants. A mid key is generally detached and neutral, and a low key is a closing gesture when the interlocutor's wishes to stop. Next category is fit. The category of fit deals with the continuous classification of successive items in the discourse. It is therefore related to the discourse structure, the patterns of conversation. It handles the relationship between adjacency pairs and question types. Sinclair and Coulthard exemplify it in the following way. A asks a question, "What is the capital of England?" And B replies in the following ways. 1. London. 2. If you look at this map, you will see it's in big type. 3. I suppose you are thinking of London, my hometown. 4. Why do you ask? That's an irrelevant question. I'm afraid I don't know a thing about capitals and all that. Good gracious, don't you know? A's elicitation can be answered in a number of ways, as we've shown just now. It can be a minimal response which is totally fitting, as in 1. 2, it can satisfy the notional presuppositions of the elicitations but is structurally independent, as in 2. 3, it can be something which satisfies notional presuppositions but sets up further presuppositions, as in 3. Or 4, it can also challenge the terms of the question, which raises further questions like A. Was the question properly asked? B. Was there a feasible answer? C. Was it directed at the right addressee? Sinclair and Coulthard then discuss 2 more possibilities of B's response. If B says, "Beg pardon," it will indicate that B has not heard or understood the question and would like A to repeat the question. If B chooses to remain silent, it will result in a complete break in discourse, suggesting that the question was misheard or is being crudely evaded. We may suggest here that "beg pardon" would be considered a genuine cooperative response, which has also an element of apology and simultaneously a force of request for repetition. Silence, on the other hand, is not considered cooperative and may result in the building of tension. Sinclair and Coulthard do not suggest explicitly which responses will form the adjacency pairs, but they definitely imply the responses 1 to 3 are cooperative, but 4 is not, as it challenges the terms of question. I shall illustrate the same concept with the help of the following. A's initiation, "What's your name?" may have lots of different replies from B. The possibilities are 1. Raju. 2. Same as yours. 3. Why do you ask? 4. What do you mean? 5. I can't tell you. 6. Why didn't you ask my father? 7. You are a fool. A makes an elicitation. B's possible utterances are all related to A's opening move, but not all of them are answering moves. It is important here to consider elocutionary intent and pragmatic presuppositions of A's elicitation. Pragmatic presuppositions are the propositions that the speaker takes for granted to be true in making the utterance. The elocutionary intent of A's elicitation is to get B to provide a piece of information. It presupposes that the speaker does not have the information and wants to sincerely. B. The speaker has the need and right to ask for information. C. The speaker has reason to believe that the addressee has the information. D. The speaker has reason to believe that the addressee is willing to supply the information. Both 1 and 2 fulfill the illocutionary intent of A's elicitation. They provide the information that A seeks, although in 2 the information is given indirectly when B says same as yours. They both support the pragmatic presuppositions of A's elicitation. They are both responding moves. The rest of the information do not provide that A seeks. They do not fulfill the illocutionary intent of A's elicitation. Rather, they challenge its pragmatic presuppositions. As only 1 and 2 are cooperative responses, they will form the second pair part of the adjacency pairs in terms of conversation analysis. According to Sinclair and Coulthard's concept of exchange structure, they will form responding moves of two-part exchanges. In terms of Sinclair and Coulthard's model, they are eliciting exchanges. The labels given to the question-answer utterances, that is discourse act or speech act, will be elicitation and reply respectively. It's also common to use the term question-answer adjacency pairs or even elicitation-reply adjacency pairs. It's important to maintain at this point that the teacher's elicitation in the classroom will be different from elicitations in other discourse types. The teacher usually knows the answer of the questions he asks in the classroom, but in drama dialogue or in ordinary conversation, people generally ask questions when they need to get the information sincerely. Elicitations in courtroom, for example, usually have a very different purpose. We have already seen that the other responses of B from 3 to 7 challenge the pragmatic presuppositions of A's elicitation. They are therefore not the cooperative responses and cannot form the second part. They will not form adjacency pairs. Rather, they'll open new exchanges, leaving the elicitation unanswered as a one-part exchange, leaving the second and third columns empty, indicating a kind of tension. The category of fit is therefore important and is a determining factor about the structure of 1, 2 or 3-part exchanges. If A acknowledges B's response with the utterance I see, this will be a third part in the exchange structure. One of the strengths of this model is that it is generalizable and allows flexibility. As Fairclough has pointed out, the strength of Sinclair and Coulthard framework is in the pioneering way in which it draws attention to systematic organizational properties of dialogue and provides ways of describing them. Its limitation, according to Fairclough, is that it lacks a developed social orientation in failing to consider how relations of power have shaped discourse practices and in failing to situate classroom discourse historically in processes of social struggle and change. Now you may go through the animation and see what's happening. The teacher shows students a funny picture and students laugh. The teacher asks, "What are you laughing at?" The students go quiet. Teacher, why are you quiet? In this exchange, students misunderstood the teacher's elicitation as a command to stop laughing, whereas the teacher wanted to ask what was funny in the picture. Now, in the next module, we will discuss some studies that are based on the work of Sinclair and Coulthard. Thank you.